to join me on our panel. In this session, we're going to be talking more about innovation and innovation culture. So not necessarily all about the detail, but we think that in innovation, you need the right culture in a company to make it happen. And so we've put together a little kind of panel game where we're going to be asking you some questions, and we have a panel of two actually great innovators in the industry, and I'd like to bring them up now. So Christine Krathwohl from Freight Verify will join us, and also, thank you, as well as Dr. Susanna Lehmann, who is the Senior Director of Production for North America region. There she is, for Volkswagen Mexico. Susanna, please join us as well.
Thank you again.
So the way it's going to work is we'll be asking you, you've got some red and green cards on your table. Hopefully you can all see them and find them. So keep your red and green, actually it's one card to be fair, red and green on either side. And what we're going to do is be asking you for your opinion on some questions around innovation. So different ways of innovating and maybe the status of your company or the industry. So we want your opinion on the question. It's a yes or no answer, even though the questions are decidedly, as our panelists probably would verify, not really yes or no questions. But we're forcing you to kind of take a view. This way we can kind of prompt some discussion. We'll then compare that to what our panelists talked about. And then we'll sort of get a chance to move from there. So do I have control, guys, over here?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Innovation.
Okay. So we need, well, good. Well, look, there we are. So we're ahead of the game there in terms of innovation, because we're already ahead of the slides. Okay, so, technology is that's one of the key things about innovation, is technology isn't always the thing that helps you get there. Before we actually move on to the question bit, we wanted to start with a couple of inspiration images from our panel to talk about, things that sort of, have inspired them. What does innovation mean to them? So we have a couple of images that they've shared. So we're just going to take a minute kind of or so per image to share them with you and hear from our panelists why they're innovative and what they mean to them. So the first one is from Susanna. So Susanna, why is this innovation for you?
Yes, of course. I think everybody is inspired by electric vehicles at the moment. We have heard about the possibilities of doing factories for batteries assemblies or for electric cars. But we also have still the autonomous driving vehicles. So this is something that we are working very hard on. And I think we will be very successful from the product side, but also in the logistics side. We have, on the vehicle logistics, LNG ships. We have ships with alternative engines running already and a lot of tests. And also for part logistics, we have a lot of smart shelf, for example, a lot of digitalization. So this is a very exciting time, and I'm very happy to be able to be part of it.
Great. So obviously this is some great innovations which are touching our industry, and with some specific to Volkswagen there as well. So our next image.
Okay, so this is mine. And I took it completely not from the business side. I said, okay, from a personal side and looking at innovation. And I thought back to, I remember watching the Jetsons when I was a kid, right? And I'm like, wow, would it be really cool to talk to my husband or my kids through a TV? Or could I have, a watch that tracks everything we do? Fast forward, right, 40 or 50 years, and all of the things are reality. So I kept it light, I kept it fun, the Rosie the robot to clean your house. Now you have, the Zumba that can do it for you. But then I thought, what are other images that are inspiring innovation? I thought of, people wearing an exoskeleton, or young children that now have 3D printed prosthetics that they use, right? So everywhere you look, I think there's really inspiring innovation. And this just took me back to, wow, everything is possible. So what can we dream up for now the next 40 years or 50 years?
Fantastic. And I threw one in there for good measure. Some of you will recognize where this is. It's basically the street where we are, Paseo de Reforma. And it's, I believe this is pretty much most Sundays here, when we clear the streets of traffic and give it back to the pedestrians. Now, I don't show this image to terrify you in this room, because it is a potential image of the future, which is maybe a city center's without cars at all, or maybe with fewer cars. And I think that, although that might be scary in some ways to people here, I actually think this is the massive opportunity for innovation, and the opportunity that we change some aspects of the way we live sustainably doesn't necessarily mean that we let go of everything else. So we might have city centers, which are free of vehicles, more pedestrian space, more space for exercise, Zumba, or whatever we're doing alongside here. And of course, the car is available for when you're leaving the city or for different functions in your life, probably electric perhaps in this case. So I noted it because when I was here, when I got in on Saturday, and they were doing bicycle races at night down the street, and then came out in the morning and there was yoga in the street and Zumba, and I just thought that this is great because this is a city packed full of cars, and yet here we go, we walk out and we can transform it. So a little thought for the future that some of that transformation can go a little bit more than maybe one day a week. So that was, for me, sort of what I would kind of think of.
And you know, it's not scary at all because we could send the cars away alone, drive the kids somewhere, or God for the mother-in-law or something like that. So this is perfect for innovations.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, that just gets us thinking a little bit about innovation before we sort of move on to other aspects of it. So in the first bit now, we're going to turn to you guys to ask for some questions. And then we'll reflect together a bit with our panel, and we'll give you guys, of course, a chance if anyone wants to sort of jump in. So our first round. So let's start on a bit of a light note. We've just had we've just heard from Anheuser-Busch InBev, and I'm sure you're all thinking a little bit about what's going to come in the, at 5:30 when we go on to the gala dinner. So we're going to know about which is the best beer in the world. They can only choose from two, and so there's two obvious choices. Is it red? Is it Corona? Let's call Corona green. So is it Corona, or is it Modelo? Red for Corona, green. Oh. Exactly, there's no Victoria. That is a big.
Or Pacifico.
So we're seeing. Someone help me with the count here. What were we? Two, because we didn't take your vote on this one. Yeah.
Oh, it's only one green.
Yeah. Oh, they're on the other side.
Oh,
so you flip. Green is Corona. Green is Corona. Red is Modelo. So. What does it look like to you guys? It looks like I think it's a pretty dead, yeah, we're on the same one. I think it's a pretty dead heat in the audience though, isn't it? And I noticed and it's also directly split. Amongst the Anheuser-Busch InBev, they have very diplomatically split that right down the middle, as has our audience. So you are a very diplomatic audience and you've split it exactly. Now, if we had had Victoria in there, who would have had Victoria green? So all the Mexicans in the room put up there. Now, the rest of the world can't, unfortunately, because I don't think we can export Victoria, can you? You don't export it, do you? Yeah, so hopefully that's an innovation that we're hoping to get from you guys pretty soon. All right, so that's how it's going to work. But the rest of the questions won't be about beer, I'm afraid. Okay, so the first question from, and now don't vote on this one, guys, because we know your answer. So from the audience, what's more important in automotive logistics, or in our friends from Anheuser-Busch in logistics and supply chain? Is it innovation or is it standardization? So again, I know that these don't feel like yes or no questions, but let's pretend that they are. You're forced to answer. Green is innovation. Red is standardization. Which is more important? Innovation, red for standardization. So I see relatively close, but I want to say there's a bit more green. I think the green edges it out, but not by a huge amount. It's maybe kind of 55-45 kind of thing. Or in Brexit world, kind of 52-48, so we're used to these sort of splits. And the answer from our panel, Susanna said innovation, and Christine said innovation. So unfortunately, they agreed, which is what it's more interesting. Sometimes they disagreed. But maybe, briefly, from both of you, why innovation? I mean, clearly they go together, but why for you innovation?
Innovation in a standardized way. This is the most diplomatic answer I can come up with, because at Volkswagen we have developed something which is called the Best of Copy Award. So this is about innovation, but it's not about the one who does the innovation, it's about the one that does best copy the innovation. So because we don't want one innovation here and one for the same problem there, and worldwide we have a lot of different solution, innovative, yes, but a lot of different solution perhaps for the same problem. We don't want that. So we really give this Best of Copy award to the best copion, as we say in Mexico. Thank you.
Anything that you'd add on that, Christine?
I would just add, I think we've spent a lot of time the last 10 years as an industry in logistics, and especially automotive logistics, standardizing old processes. And we all have old legacy systems, right, too. So it's like, I think if your innovation is compelling enough, right, it will drive the standardization that's required in the industry, or it will make sure that you're flexible enough to be able to adopt it. But I look at panels that constantly talk about how we standardize, old processes instead of working on how do we innovate to get more efficiencies in our networks.
I think one small thing I would add from a discussion we had in our ideas lab earlier when it came up around innovation is it was the emphasis for standardization. Is all this technology, all these systems, hundreds of them, but we lack the global standards and sometimes make them impossible to actually sort of use. So clearly they're the key points. So our next question from the audience. How will electrification drive logistics innovation? Does it require more innovation in terms of automotive logistics, or does it require the same amount of innovation? So in terms of producing electric vehicles, do you think this is going to need more logistics innovation or less innovation? More logistics innovation is green. The same is red. So green if you think it's more, red if you think it's the same. Okay, this is much more of an pretty overwhelming green. So the audience thinks that producing electric vehicles in the supply chain is going to require a lot more innovation. So this is a good question to put, especially I think to Susanna, who will have some experience on this soon, or does have experience here at Volkswagen. Certainly Susanna says it will require more, but I'm kind of pleased to see that Christine has a different answer, so we can maybe talk about why that is. So maybe we can start first with Susanna. Why do you think it's going to require more innovation?
I'm also interested to get your points on that.
And we will turn that around.
I know already a lot of innovations that we need to be done in battery management, so we don't want the cars to be standing anyway, but if they have to wait for a little dwell time, we have to do battery management. This will be more and more the case, even not for the 12-volt batteries, but for the large ones. So we have to have innovations to document all the maintenance that we are doing in order to give the client a clear documentation that everything has been done, that the battery is really in good shape for driving. And also for our service providers, they have to handle 400 or even 800 volt cars. This is a huge amount of electricity, and I don't want to be there when something like that is being handled improperly. So this is where we need a lot of innovations for safety, for standardization, but also for documentation, digitalization.
Christine, why do you think it'll be the same?
I guess the way I read it more was we've already started dealing with electrification in vehicles, and people are already producing them. So in my mind, it was more, autonomous vehicles are going to really drive more innovation and requirements. But then I also thought, and this is one of these where I was sitting on both sides of the fence here, because I thought one thing that's different with electrification of vehicles and with autonomous vehicles is we have new entrants into the market that are not our traditional OEMs. And the new entrants, they do not embrace status quo, right? They're pushing us and pushing all of us in the industry of why can't we be more like B2C versus B2B? So I think that will really drive us more, are these entrants that really don't care what the traditional process has been for moving a vehicle from the dealer or from an assembly plant to a dealer. I mean, there are new entrants looking at coming to the market with 0 brick and mortar stores, right? So how do we manage through that?
Okay, but leave alone the charging stations you have to install in. We have to have them. You have to have perhaps applications to know where they are, how to find them. Do you use this supplier or another one? Can you use that other one supplier's charging station you're running out of, etc. And so all this is an innovation that perhaps is already happening, but we still need a lot more in that sector.
In the conversations I've had with manufacturers who are building more EVs is again, on the one hand, you may be using a new platform which has actually simplified many processes from a production point of view, fewer parts, maybe more innovation. So some aspects of the process are simpler. However, One, this is usually an added process on top of building other vehicles, maybe in the same plant. So that's actually more complexity within. And secondly, of course, from a production point of view, new tooling, new requirements around all that. And obviously, as you mentioned, Susanna, sometimes entirely new supply chains with processes around batteries. So it's a big topic and an exciting one that we're looking at more. And obviously, Volkswagen in the thick of it there, bringing an EV to Chattanooga and hopefully to Mexico in the future as well. Next question. And again, you know, if we force you to make an answer, even if you don't want to, which segment of the supply chain do you see more innovation right now? Do you see more innovation in inbound logistics, or are you seeing more innovation in outbound vehicle logistics? So from the audience, more innovation, green is inbound and red is outbound. So green if you're seeing more innovation in inbound, and red if you're seeing it in outbound. I would say it's probably going green. Yeah. So we are fairly convincingly more innovation in inbound logistics, which is not something dissimilar to what we've heard, but Susanna has a different view. She thinks it's more in outbound, and so does Christine, which is what I like. So
perhaps we misunderstood the question.
this is also
possible. I interpreted, honestly speaking, where do we need more innovations? Because
okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, that's why we clarify it now.
So we were thinking about all the digitalization measures that we have already in the material side. This is really cool. This is smooth. But outbound logistics, I mean, who knows? Everybody knows we are hanging papers in the cars. We're still dealing papers to sign documents, etc. So this is where we need a lot
more innovation. Yeah. Okay, so in a way, if we read the question the same as hopefully the audience did, you saw more innovation in inbound, but you need more innovation in outbound.
I don't know, Christine, if you saw the same.
So when I answered these questions originally, I didn't know that I did both on a lot of them, right? I didn't think it was one or the other, because if I look across some of the new innovations, one being real-time visibility, right? That applies to both inbound and outbound. AI applies to both inbound and outbound. Predictive analytics applies to both inbound, outbound, aftermarket, right, across the board. So I ended up saying outbound because I do think what we've been able to develop at the company I work for, Freight Verify, will answer some of these questions that you raise here where we think there needs to be more innovation. But I feel that a lot of these innovations span across all segments of the logistics ecosystem.
Good points. So this, I think, is a key question, and again, it's hard to put it really down to one. But what do you think is a bigger driver of innovation? Is it your company culture, or is it actually using and implementing new technology? So again, having an organization that's ready and willing to innovate, or is it the new technology itself? So green if you think it's company culture, and red if you think it's actually new technology. This is overwhelmingly green, but there are a few reds, and we'll come back to that and we'll give some people a chance to comment, because you're right, Susanna, we should be hearing from the audience there as well. But the answers as well, Susanna, company culture, and Christine, company culture. So we're all aligned here. We all agree, but let's still talk about why we agree.
I've been approached by a lot of people with really cool ideas, with really cool technology, but honestly speaking, we did not find a problem big enough for this technology. So I started to look the other way around and said, hey, what are the problems that I want to solve with innovations, and please give me solutions for my problems. And this is a call for all of you, an invitation. Please don't approach me saying I have a new system called whatever, and this is what I can offer you, this is my technology. It's there because everybody has a lot of more technologies, new things, digitalization, data management. This is all happening right now. But for my case, automotive industry, really say we have to look at the problems and then look at the technology. And this is more rooted in company culture. So let's really look at the problems and how we can solve it with technology or with organizational measures.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely well said. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great new technologies out there, but does it really solve a problem that we have today? And just because it's the shiny penny doesn't mean it's the right thing to go after or to invest in, right? So you need to have an innovation really that drives value and perceived value that you can go after. But I think definitely the company culture, and you have a culture that will also embrace then embrace disruptive technology if you think it is going to solve that problem. And I think, unfortunately, in our industry, we've had too many companies and too many individuals that are too much afraid to change and really don't embrace disruptive technologies, even if they think they'll solve a problem.
Yes, absolutely right. Because we have been talking so much about data, about integrity of data, complete visibility, etc. And it's not the problem of technology. It's there. You can do it. You told me at least. So I can do it. But what do I need to do that? I need the people who give the data. I need the master of data to provide them, to allow some provider to use them all. This is culture, this is organization, and this is what we have to improve a lot more than technology. Technology is there.
And I think it can become trendy in some companies as well to kind of play at change theater a little bit. So, maybe we take the ties off and we put a kicker table or a foosball table in the office and say, yeah, we've got startup culture here and stuff, but it's really key how do you actually drive a change culture. I don't think that's so easy to do overnight when you come from some of the sorts of organizations in the automotive industry, traditionally arranged and top-down organized, etc. So it's certainly not an easy thing to necessarily just snap your fingers and get. So, this is another question. Who do you think has greater responsibility to drive supply chain innovation? Is it the manufacturers? So in this case, the OEMs or the tier suppliers who are the users, if you like, of logistics services? Or is it the logistics service providers? And let's include all the ecosystem around that, IT. So is it the manufacturers or the service providers who have the greater responsibility? Green if it's the manufacturers, and red if it's the service providers. Green for manufacturers, red service providers. I see some flipping. Lars is cheating over there. So what is red and green? Purple. I think no, that's red and blue.
It's brown.
Brown, yeah. That would be. Hold on, keep them for a second. I think we're still seeing, it's a slight majority for, would you say green?
What was green again?
Green was manufacturers.
Oh.
So I think we're a slight, people are getting tired with their hands holding up. I'm making you do too much late in the afternoon. I think it was an ever so slight majority for the manufacturers, but obviously there was still some clear views out there. Susanna thinks it's the service providers when forced with the option, as does Christine. What do you think?
Yeah, when forced with the options, because, thank you, Chucho, my assistant, drew this balance in here, because we were really not sure. Of course, we want to assume our responsibility, but also we want solutions from our service suppliers. And we have said they should give us these integrated solutions, especially in the outbound logistics, but our task, our responsibility as manufacturers is to describe our problems as clear as possible so that you can have the chance to offer the solutions we really want and need.
Yeah, so I love the picture here because my answer was both. Also, right, the manufacturers need to definitely be a voice in this and what's required. But I think the service providers, because of where they sit and how they interact with multiple or most OEMs or manufacturers, they can take those needs and requirements for each of them, create a solution that hopefully then optimizes and leverages then the larger volume and provides more efficiencies than just driving a single output or single benefit for one manufacturer. So I said both, but I think if I had to pick one, like I said, it probably tilts a little bit more to the service providers.
You guys have cracked the code of these questions, right? Which is the real answer is almost always both. But forcing you to answer kind of creates some interesting tensions. So before the next round, we're going to do some innovation case studies. But before that, actually, I wanted to give the audience a chance to respond to anything. So does anybody feel strongly about to comment, whether whether it was where innovation should be for on EVs, more or less, whether it's manufacturers versus logistics providers, whether the company culture, standards versus innovation. Any comments or questions from the audience that agrees, disagrees, or has anything to add from what you've kind of heard from our panelists so far? Yeah, we have.
Hello everyone, my name is Thomas Ries and I'm working for Horizon Auto Logistics. I wanted to comment what Susanne just mentioned. I think it's very important that the OEMs define the problem and suppliers find a solution using the technology. So I think the innovation is really on our side to try to bring as much as possible, but the problem we need to understand the customer's needs and be able to address it. Yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. It's a very valid comment from your side.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Anyone else from the audience? Yeah, we have a comment right here. Just a little mic right behind you. Yeah. If you say your name and company. Should be on. Scream.
This one?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Thank you. Again, this is Bertrand Weiss from Boxmark. I had some conversation here, and I think it's going into the same direction. But for my perception, we came now to a point generally in the automotive industry, also with the logistics, that I think that we try to copy each other, which means you have, or you try as the OEM manufacturers, you try to understand each and every step of us as a supplier, and we are the experts. Okay, so you try to copy expertise, and you have to pay these people, which makes it even more expensive, and they don't understand the tiny little details which made us where we are. So I think it's time to invite us to help you to becoming great. It's very easy. What I need is only participants in a work group. You define the problem, I agree, but we can find solutions for you. And it's even cheaper for you to get this know-how from us. It's my point of view.
Great,
okay.
so thank you very much for your interesting ideas. Thank you.
Anyone else want to add anything now? Okay.
Oh.
It's a good one now.
Very good afternoon. Alistair Newton from Automotive Logistics. An interesting point about information technology. I mean, my job is head of global business management at Automotive Logistics magazine and conferences is to talk to innovative information technology companies. And there's always a struggle that the automotive industry is very set in its ways, and if it isn't broken, don't fix it. And they're hungry to share their expertise. They know that it's a very long term. To integrate a new system is extremely complicated. But I think for me anyway, and certainly the clients that I've been working with, they find it very, very hard to initiate those communications. It always feels that the door's firmly closed unless you're a fashionable IT provider. I can think of two beginning with 3 letters, abbreviations. But there are suppliers here and around our conferences all over the world who genuinely have something new to bring, but it may be that they're not a huge company with 1,000 employees, but they've got expertise not just from automotive, but they've also got expertise that they want to bring to you from FMCG, from pharmaceutical, and therefore I understand what this gentleman was saying about the OEM having expertise and wanting to share it, but there's also the other side that these guys have picked up intelligence and, I wouldn't say corner cutting, but they've certainly got intelligence that's worthy of your time.
If I understand that right, so you're telling us not to use only the big ones. Okay, that is for sure. But as I said, I don't need just a solution that somebody has. I need a solution for my problem. So I, in my personal experience, have learned that it's usually also the smaller companies that have this flexibility, that don't have standardized solution that they apply here and there and there, but that they really can make individualized solutions, and that is highly appreciated, of course.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Alistair. Okay, for the next bit of it, we'll take a little break from asking you, although we are gonna come back to you for some more questions. We've asked our panelists to each share very briefly an innovation case study, so a real kind of like a real life example of where they're applying or seeing innovation. And we're going to start with Susanna.
Yeah. Who of you drives a Volkswagen? Okay, well, that's too little, okay. But of course, your cars have been produced in a very professional way, but at the end of our production chain, we test them usually. We test them in a so-called road test and a water test in order to be 100% sure that in each individual car, nothing is done improperly. So these tests are usually done by very experienced drivers. These are really tough guys with a lot of experience, so they can really hear some tickling noise over there, and they know, this is this part, or this is this tolerance being too high, or whatever, from the noise or from the feel that they have. So what we are trying actually is using artificial intelligence to learn and copy this experience in order to make this all virtually, to do a test, but not a physical test, not with all the very expensive installation and with people driving around, but with a complete documentation of all the production steps, and from all this experience of the people, trying to put that in a virtual intelligence, in an algorithm that tells us, hey, these cars with these documented processes will have perhaps this and that error that has to be fixed before going out to the client. Mm. This is something very interesting.
Mm. Yeah. Very exciting. Great example. Yeah. Christine.
Okay, so I've participated over the years in a number of these conferences, and there was always a session on everyone saying, dude, where's my car? And all the OEMs not really having a good idea from a visibility of, they know the car left on a rail car, say, or it arrived into a port, and then they might not get another status update for another 7 days as it travels on rail, or they might not get an update sitting in a port processor for another 4 days until the event actually occurred and they received that event. So, you know, over on the left, here's this dude again saying, hey, where's my car? In the middle there, there's our Freight Verify platform that, so on the finished vehicle, we track at a shipment level, incorporating then all of the VINs within that shipment. So on this example, it's leaving an assembly plant down in the Leon area, and it's going north up to Texas on a railroad, and you can see the breadcrumbs along the way. So on rail, it's about every 30 minutes to 2 hours. You get a CLM message as the rail car travels north, south, east, or west. Mm. And then once it gets up to the railhead, then it transfers over to a haul-away provider, and you get every 15 minutes at max long lat updates of where that car is, or where that vehicle is moving to the final dealership. So it's great to have shipment level data, and we can tell you on the railroad, these are the VINs that are in that multi-level rail car with the other VINs. And then on the haul-away, we can tell you these are the 5 VINs then going to that specific dealer, and we can do predictive intelligent ETAs, right? Every time we get a long lap position, we can recalculate an ETA based on miles left to travel, weather, traffic, historical performance, historical dwell at rail interchanges, or sitting at a railhead. But then over on the right, I know there's some industry groups working on what should the standardization be for connected car updates, right? And I say, why spend all this time on standardizing connected car updates? Let us just consume whatever connected car update you want to provide to us. So in this example up on the top right, you can see that that's actually at the assembly plant's rail yard when it's leaving to ship. And that's a ping that we receive from a connected car from the actual vehicle. And in the bottom picture, that's a connected car ping that we received once it arrived at the dealership. We're also working with a couple OEMs to start receiving also vehicle health information through connected car. So we can receive information saying, front right tire is flat, so we can provide that information then to the railhead operator saying, when you're going to go unload this multi-level car that's going to arrive in 5 days from now, you need to be prepared, front right tire on that truck is flat. So I think that there's a lot of business efficiencies, operational efficiencies we can gain when you marry connected car too. But I will tell you, I think the solution in the middle, even without connected car, provides more visibility real time than's out in the industry today.
It's great. I think if they made the sequel to that film today, it would be really short and boring, wouldn't it? It would just be, where's my car? No, there it is. It's not, you see it on your app. So those are two great, I think, really practical examples of innovation that are or can be implemented. Maybe before we move on, Susanna, were there any kind of barriers to moving that project through that you had to overcome, whether internally or externally, and in moving through that? And
What do you think?
never at Volkswagen or in
And it's still not being applied 100%.
Okay.
We are in testing, we are trying that out. What do we need to really give that 100% level of security that we need in that issue? So, of course, it's a new way of doing things, and it is always difficult to convince and to be sure that you really can hit the same level of security as you actually have.
Absolutely.
But I also want to say absolutely to your solution, Christine, this is something that is really solving problems that we actually have. So for me, it's not possible to accept that we can track every pizza or whatever you order. You can tell exactly where it is. It's in the oven, it's on the way, it's in front of your house. But we cannot tell where the cars are. This is really something that, thank you, that we need and appreciate.
And Christine, is it, again, talking about implementing this, is what barriers are you facing barriers, or is the industry embracing it, or is it anything?
So we've been extremely successful. We developed this in Q1, Q2 of last year. Started implementing in Q3 with 2 of the large American automotive companies. And in the last 4 months of last year, we tracked 2 million VINs on our platform.
Okay.
And so we have additional capability that we're continuing to challenge ourselves, like how do we provide our customers visibility of capacity at every single railhead with forecasting to let them know when you're going to get bottlenecks at a railhead based on how much inventory is coming into that location and what your traditional capacity is that you're pulling out every day. And I don't think that that capability really exists today, or it's done a lot on spreadsheets, right? So for us, our goal is, how do we get in front of all of you OEMs to say, I think the more OEMs and the more VINs we're tracking out of this, we can become pretty powerful with how we can drive some operational efficiencies within the network.
Great. So before we move on to a next round of Ask the Audience, which we'll do a little bit quicker than before maybe, so that we can get to your party. Anyone have any comments or questions about either of, for example, the cases which you just heard about? So, is that a hand, Lars, or is that? No. Okay, well, then let's ask a few more questions. I think thank you again for those. I think those sort of, they're probably simpler sounding than they are, and obviously harder to implement than they look, as ever is the case with innovation. So, next round of Ask the Audience 2.0. How is innovation in your company driven? Is it driven top down, or is it driven bottom up? So I'm talking about from the perspective of your company. Green if it's driven top down, and red if it's driven bottom up.
We were expecting a tequila question. You did the beer for round 1, right?
You wanted tequila. Well, we're coming on to that in the evening, I promise.
Good.
Top down if your company is green if you're still seeing if you're seeing a top down innovation driven, or red. And I see a couple of people putting both up. I think it's more like a bit more green, so more top down. Probably more top down overall. Susanna also sees it top down, and so does Christine. Maybe Susanna, maybe briefly, just tell us why. Is it Volkswagen? Because that would, maybe is that a thing at a big company like that?
I think perhaps it's a big company syndrome, but it's definitely not Volkswagen itself. It's I think you've been talking about the automotive industry here. So it's something that is usually very successful until now. So why change a winning scheme or team?
Yeah.
This is something that is really in the heads, and company culture has been a subject. So I feel that we still don't have this company culture where new ideas or errors are really something positive and seen so positive that you want to talk about.
So we're still kind of driven from top down, it seems, at the moment.
Yeah, so I actually said both again, just because, we're a smaller company founded by a really just brilliant, innovative, entrepreneurial logistician. So, he brings all of these challenging ideas every single day and pushes us as a company of thinking, not just finished vehicles today, but, 3 steps out, and how do we get there? But he's really driven a culture within the company that now it's bottom up, and we have, meetings every single Monday where we now prioritize as a group of all these innovations and inputs, requests that from voice of the customer, from our own team, and capture them, and how do we move those forward. So I think it needs to become part of the DNA in a company.
Yeah. Okay. Biggest inhibitor of innovation. Culture. We talked about culture before, but do you think your culture inhibits innovation, or does budget constraint hinder innovation? We talk a lot about ROIs that need to be under a year, maybe even much less than that sometimes. So what do you see in your atmosphere where you're working, whether it's your company or within the context of your customers? Culture which is holding back innovation, or budget cost. So let's say green is a culture. Sorry, I've just revealed that. I went back one more. I clicked it too far. Yeah, I forget what you've just seen. Green if it's company culture. Red if it's the budget. It's culture. Culture, what is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, isn't that the famous saying? And Susanna thinks it's culture, and Christine also thinks it's culture. So we can move on a bit, since we sort of tend to agree that it is culture. Although we hear a lot about restrictions on ROI and stuff, and I'm sure that's frustrating and causes issues. At the end of the day, you've got to be open for it to actually work. The budgets will matter less. This I think is important. Is there room for a fail and learn culture in our context, in automotive logistics, in just-in-time supply chains? Yes or no? So we talk a lot in agile, MVPs, creating prototypes, testing them, having room for error, and learning from your failures. Do you think in the atmosphere you're working, can you fail and learn? Is it so green if we have a fail and learn culture, or red if there's no fail and learn culture? I would say the Reds have it. So mostly where we don't see a fail and learn culture in the automotive industry, or certainly in the automotive supply chain industry. Susanna says no. Christine says yes. So maybe, Susanna, why not? What you don't see that? I mean, maybe just a little bit about why we don't, what you don't see so far.
Yeah, fail and learn is. Perhaps I can say we are not failing enough at the moment. That sounds crazy, but we have a lot of challenges. This is, of course, known and accepted, but we do not fail enough that we really feel the urge to generate that culture, giving people the space to talk about what really went wrong and how can we improve. Not about who did that, but how can we improve. And this is something, of course, we know we have to improve, but it's also running quite well. So. This is something that we have perhaps to force us ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
But I also think, just real quick, as
absolutely.
Service providers coming in, you talked about a minute ago, proof of values or MVPs and that, and I think, we become innovative enough that we can do proof of values or MVPs to where if it is a fail, it's a managed fail, right? It's not going to shut down your entire assembly plant and all of your revenue, right? So I think that we need to embrace more fail and learn. And how do you do it in somewhat of a managed environment so it's not going to blow your quarter or blow your month, right?
Hopefully, I really have to say that loud now again, because we really are in such a globalized supply chain network that we cannot allow ourselves to fail. If we fail, if the system fails, it fails everywhere. Look at the actual situation with the coronavirus. The whole world is suffering about that. So it's really one little error has a lot of impacts that we did not have until now.
It is a tough call. You know, we do need to learn from our mistakes, but you know, those mistakes can't cost $1 million a minute as they can in some cases. How do legacy IT systems impact your innovations? Are they hindering it or are they encouraging it? So we all know the automotive industry deals with a lot of legacy systems. Are your legacy systems hindering your innovation? Let's call that green. Or are they encouraging your innovations? And let's call that red. So, kind of, I would say just about hindering, just about green. Yeah, just about green. So just about hindering, but maybe not as overwhelming as you might have guessed in terms of some of the challenges we face with legacy systems. For Susanna and at Volkswagen, and speaking across the broader automotive industry, it seemed to hinder. And in Christine, it's seeming to encourage there. Now, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I just think there's worth talking just briefly about why they're hindering.
Of course, it's not the system itself, but it's the system functioning. It's a system that is there, that it's not perfect, but it's functioning, it's working. This is one point. The other point that we were discussing is normally it's the system, actually legacy system, that does not give all the data that you need for innovation. So I know it's a vicious circle, but if you say you have a system, it's working, so why should I change it? Okay, I could change it with a more innovative IT technology, but I would need a lot more data, a big data lake or whatever. So this is these two aspects. The system is there, it's working, why should I change it? Do I really have enough business case behind? And the second, what do I need to do a new system? Yeah, great. Do you want to add anything to that, Christine?
Yeah, I would just say, because you have legacy systems that might have those gaps, right, I think that encourages then new technology, and how do we work with fulfilling those gaps? And I mean, I remember 15, 20 years ago working at 2 large OEMs, right, and you could never integrate back into one of these legacy systems. That's not a hindrance anymore. There's a way to do that now today, so.
That's definitely a 5-minute warning to me, I think.
Warning.
Good points. So this is, I think, one of our last questions anyway, and we'll move through it quickly because there's just a couple of points I want to raise with you. How is your organization adopted innovation from other industries? Has your organization adopted innovations from other industries? Green, if you've taken innovations from other industries, so the automotive industries, and red if you haven't. So green if you've taken innovations from other industries. That's encouraging. It's almost overwhelming, but there's a few reds in the crowd, and we're going to have to probably find them out later. Especially our friends in the front here can talk to you guys about other innovations you can look at. And let's just look at briefly, Susanna. Volkswagen certainly has, and so has Christine. I think in the interest of time, we'll sort of we take it as read that most of us are actually looking at other industries here, despite the fact that the automotive industry can be very insular. I think that's fair enough to say. Can think of itself sometimes as being the best of the best and work in a somewhat isolated way and doesn't always look outside. But I think so many things, and we've discussed them today and a lot in this session, kind of certainly mandate us to look at other industries. And in fact, we're kind of becoming like other industries because of e-commerce, because of digitalization. It's transforming aspects of us. So I think, kind of on that note, in terms of how do you kind of encourage innovation. There's someone that I wanted to actually ask something about, and Lars, I did say I'd bring you into this, and I thought this might be a good moment to do it on that kind of basis of how we collaborate and how we work cross industry, cross sector, across themes. So, we have a little bit of an innovation here in that Susanna's, I'm sure I can reveal that Susanna's husband is also a key leader in innovation and NIT, Lars Boyman. And so Lars, why don't you just, as we talked about, here, up front here, Rich, sorry. Oh, sorry, you have a mic, I thought Bruce was coming. Yeah, so Lars, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so my opinion is that we do it too less, that we look to other industries. So I would love to visit BMW at San Luis Potosí, but maybe I should visit other companies to learn from them, because what I can learn from them is maybe more or less the same what we do. No?
Yeah.
But I also want to comment the other question we had before. Do the legacy systems hinder us? No? And Suzanne suffered in 2017 when I went all around the world to 20 plants, because the production board member said, okay, look to all the systems, find out what we have there. In all these 20 plants we have there, and do we really come forward in the digitalization of production and logistics? And the answer was no, because we had hundreds of systems. They were not integrated with each other, so there was no chance to work with data. What finally led to that we now work on this digital production platform, which we do with AWS. Why do we do it with AWS? Because we also found out when we want to make out of 1,000 systems, we want to make one system out of it, we will not do that with the methods which we have in the past. Find money, find resources, develop an IT systems, and in 100 years we will be ready. That's not the way. So we said we need a partner there, and we need a partner who's also globally, who can bring money and resources into this game. So this was the reason why we came to that decision.
Okay, that's great. Great insight.
And as I have the micro,
yes, you should.
I would also say, so I'm, maybe some words to me. I was born and raised in Wolfsburg, and I started 40 years ago, no wonder, to work there. Since it's the global headquarters of Volkswagen, I started to work in Volkswagen. I was also working here in Mexico in the 90s. I was working in Bratislava, Slovakia in the 2000s. And you could ask yourself, okay, what does a corporate guy from Germany doing here on the automotive logistics? You answered already. I'm the husband of Suzanne, and she decided 1 year ago to move here to Mexico, so I had to find out how to follow her. And finally, I found a successor in Wolfsburg, so now I'm in the last weeks of the transition here to Mexico. And since half of my career I spent it in logistics, and I was also working in Germany with the Bundesvereinigung für Logistik, which is the German Logistics Association, which has chapters worldwide. And when they heard, okay, you're going to Mexico, they said, well, in Mexico we don't have a representative. Don't you want to do that? So I would like to take this opportunity to put the flag of BVL on Mexican ground on this occasion. And I would like to work with all of you and your companies. I will contact you within the next weeks and months. And in close cooperation with Automotive Logistics, we will strengthen the logistics community here in Mexico. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So that just it seemed appropriate on the topic of collaboration, innovation, how we can work together. And so I'm quite excited for what we can do together with the BVL as well, and together with you. So one last question. I was kind of mulling whether with you all would really like, how you'd like to go forward from here. Because I did bring a slide deck with me, and I can show you 55 slides on the future of the USMCA and how the industry is going to go. I have them ready to go, so I'm really happy to show them for you. Or it's party time. So I think we'll do the green as a more feel. So red if you want all the presentation, and green if you want to move on to the party. Oh. Oh no, there's a couple of votes for the slides. Okay, cue it up, Rich. No, I think it's pretty overwhelming that it's game over here. But I want to thank our great panelists for their input, and for the audience for all your participation in that.
Thank you to you.
Thank you. was a lot of fun, and we've had a lot of fun today. So much great information and input right from the beginning with Jesus Yade and with all the great discussion we've had so far. We're looking forward to continue that tomorrow morning as well, so don't go home, come back.